Hello, and welcome to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. In this episode, I'm all up on my high horse, feeling excited about the grant experiment. And James, too, has some interesting news from Yaddo. Hope you enjoy.
So, hey, Pat.
Yes, James.
So we were talking moments ago, before we started going down some other alleyway that we may turn into a segment or not.
Probably not.
And, and you were saying that you had a moment of despair around grants, but then you found your way to joy and enlightenment, I think.
Well, don't get crazy. I mean, that's a little, it's a bit of an
Well,
exaggeration, but I agree. Okay.
we're rooting for you.
Hmm?
We're rooting for you.
Yeah, thanks.
You know.
So, what is it now? February 13th? Well, guess what? I haven't updated my log in my grants for Pat spreadsheet because I've been so busy doing grant stuff. So, you know my day job, book editor.
Yep,
I have two projects due tomorrow. One of them I'm going to get on time. One of them I've already talked to the writer because my mom, is health stuff. And so she's absolutely fine with getting hers next week. Not something I would normally ever do, but then I also got re-energized on this grant stuff on the 2nd of February, which as we speak now is 11 days ago. And I don't work weekends if I can avoid it, but I've been working weekends. But anyway, so what energized me? You know what? I don't know, but I talked about it in a previous thing that we taped on the grant update. What it has become is that I am going to turn in a grant application on time.
Wow.
Either Valentine's Day tomorrow, because I love doing stuff on early, or when it's actually due, which is February 15th. And it's going to be a grant application in which I have absolutely stripped myself of all pretensions that I can do this shit on my own. So I have, it's a kind of a specific weird grant. It's called the Miriam Hebb Research Grant from Access Copyright, which is a Canadian funding body. It does more than fund grants, but anyway. And so the research grant is for research when you're working on a book. I think it might apply to other creative things as well, not visual arts and stuff. I'm not sure, but anyway, for me, it's a book. You have to have a product that you can show afterwards, but it's not for like getting the product published. It's actually for researching anything you need to know in order to create the project. And as part of it, so for novels, that's a little tricky because for me, I discover what it's about by writing it. And so, and I'm looking for insight into things that I'm noticing in sort of the gray areas of my own experience, And so I've talked about this a little bit. I'm calling it a Frankenstein novel. Its working title is Call Me an Optimist. And I'll tell you, trying to understand this grant application as part of laying the groundwork for being able to write that novel with the minimum of dead ending has really made me happy and like energized me because I had to articulate a question and then I had to support that with up to 1,000 words of kind of
Really
talking to a bunch of different aspects of the project, what kind of research I'm talking about, where I need to do it, how it will affect my my body of work, how it will impact my career, basically. You can use career as a writer. And then the final one was how to demonstrate my own ability and availability to carry out the research described in my proposal. So it's very, to me, quite a complex piece of writing because I had to really think things through. And the part of it is to write up to 200 words an inquiry question, which I'd never written one before. It's a sort of like the reverse of a hypothesis, but it has all these hallmarks. It has to be open-ended. It can't be easily answered. So it can't be a closed question that you can answer with yes or no. It has to integrate or or show the need that the research project you're proposing cannot exist without the question incorporating it, right? Like it has to all make sense. And so relating that to a novel, if I'm writing a book on the history of basketball in Canada, I can have a research question that's fairly straightforward. But for a novel, I felt it was a bit more complicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
So last night I had kind of like a rough draft of all the thinking, and I had left out the most important part, which is the inquiry question, because I didn't know how to write one. And I asked, so let me back up. First of all, I didn't know, in researching the last 2 years of winners, I noticed that by far the majority of them were writing nonfiction books. And that was not what I'm writing. So I figured out who might be writing a novel and emailed them and asked them.
Really?
Yeah. You know what? I was inspired by your little experiments thing, little brainstorms.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I sent them an email saying, I hope you don't mind my writing to you. I'm a Canadian fiction writer who's running a 1-year experiment on grants as an income stream, partly for the podcast I co-host and partly out of personal interest. And then I give them links. I came across your name while researching the Marion Hebb Research Grant from Access Copyright and gained the impression that you might have been awarded the grant for a fiction project. I'm wondering if you would have time to shoot me back a note on whether you did in fact use a fiction project in your application. If you did, I'll know it can be done. And then I just explained that, the grant was due about, I'm going to say, it was probably less than a week after. Like I emailed this on Monday and it's due on Saturday, right? So far, I just wanted to explain that, because they'll know the deadline too if they won the grant. So far, the hallmarks of my grant experiment have included serious issues with procrastination and imposter syndrome. So although the deadline for the Hebb grant is in a few days and I do plan to apply, there's no hurry to get back to me and no pressure to respond at all, of course. Thanks and best regards. And then I add as a PS that we are always on the lookout for podcast guests, working artists across creative disciplines, including writers. If you'd be interested in talking about your own work and or creative practice, please let me know.
I like it.
Yeah, so that was a little brainstorm experiment. That was completely inspired by your email to agents saying this is not a pitch about your trundle stories.
Now, have you heard back?
Yes.
Oh, you did?
I got responses within a few minutes.
Really?
Yes. Very, very generous writer. Just said not only, so I actually sent this to 2 writers. One who's just said, yes, I got it for a fiction project. It's about this. And thanks for mentioning the podcast. And the other said yes. And the feedback I got later was that they liked this particular aspect of my application. And I think for him, it was that he was going to go to the archives, like a specific archival holding in his province, to do the research. And that was a plus for them. They want to know that your plans are specific, apparently, is what that told me. Yeah. So that was so incredibly heartening and generous of these writers to take the time and, to just say, yeah. And yes, I sweetened the pot with a little GU guest spot, but, we're all in this together. And I just feel like I'm curious about grant winners. I'm curious about that aspect. And, we don't need to talk about that. Maybe we just talk about their creative practice or their work. So that was my little brainstorm. And then both said you should absolutely apply with a fiction project. Like, don't hesitate kind of thing. And so that really finished transforming my attitude towards the grant. And then so I had struggled through, I watched videos made for kids on how to write an inquiry question, even though my undergrad degree was in history, because I don't think they had those when I was doing my undergrad in the 1830s.
Well, yeah. Nobody teaches how to do grants, right? My degree is in political science, right? So that infers having to do a lot of research and a lot of writing, but there was not a peep about, oh, by the way, here's how you go about getting a grant.
Well, yeah, and I'm not even talking about grants. The inquiry question is actually something that's a pedagogical thing now. It wasn't when I was doing my history undergrad, not that I knew of anyway. So there's all kinds of videos out there, not for people applying to grants, but just for people in school going, okay, you want to know how to write one of these? So I watched a 6-minute video from a woman in Australia and blah, blah, blah. there's a lot of shit out there, and I was more confused than ever after I watched my way through it. I took an hour to watch and read and print out worksheets and stuff, and I was just like, my eyes started twitching. Um, I was like, sort of doing that kind of like, I actually went into my editing work with incredible relief because it was so much less complicated than what I was going to have to do. And then, so I got as far as I could on my own, and I printed everything out last night and sat down with my brother who's visiting from New Zealand. He's a really, really smart guy. And he, like, I had a blank box in the application form for my inquiry question, and I read him all my stuff, and we talked about it for maybe 10 minutes because I was really tired, and it was like 9 o'clock or something, or 8 o'clock. No, it was probably about 8. And he said something that just gelled it all together. He was like, I think what they need to see in your inquiry question is the sort of the integration, why this research matters to this, how it will work together, because I had it sort of as two separate things. Here's the novel, and here's what I want to find out. And it was because I hadn't really explained the novel very well, but they don't want a synopsis. They don't want a plot summary. They want to know enough about it so they can give you feedback, or not give you feedback, so they can either give you money or not, so they can see where your research fits into it, kind of thing. And so I was supposed to send another draft, like the draft. I had asked a friend of my writing group to give me feedback on it, because this is where I was trying to like get out of my own silo and just use the advice that I have heard, which is don't do these things without feedback. And I sent her an email late last night, just said, I'm not ready. I'm going to sleep on it. And then this morning I woke up and I just went into my office at like 6:30 with a cup of coffee. Oh no, I started in bed and just wrote out as much as I could. And then I came in here and like sort of tidied shit up and, changed the language, took out stuff that didn't really belong. The only reason I was able to write the inquiry question, which still needs work, it's only 77 words. I'm allowed 200 words. So I've got room to improve it.
Now, one clarifying question. So the inquiry question, do they want the question, but do they also want some form of answer with it? Or is it really where this is the thing I'm looking into?
Yeah, they want the question. And and it has to be a particular type of question. So I can attach all the stuff I found from, to our segment.
So does it include like, here's my theory of what the answer could be or something like that?
Well, it's too complicated. I still don't really understand it. But you can, it can be the reverse of your hypothesis, but it's never, if you have the answer, it's not complex enough to be an inquiry question.
Right.
It demands, it has to be something that you cannot answer. You can't Google the answer.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of it.
You have to literally be a scholar doing research.
We have to do the research that you're describing, know.
That's what I mean. It's part of establishing you as a scholar, seeking with a scholarly question to do this kind of, research. That
I'm not so sure about the word scholar.
Okay.
As a writer, as a creative person, whatever. Scholar implies school, and I'm not in a school. So
no, that's reasonable. It's legitimacy,
It's kind of like, do you know what you're doing? And so I don't know where it's going to go, but what I feel today, so it's Thursday, February the 13th. I'm hoping to get feedback from my brother again on the whole thing, because I changed a bunch, and then from my friend Kate, at some point tomorrow, so I can empty my mind of the thing and just focus on my paid work for the rest of the day. And then Saturday I can hand it in feeling like two things. One, there's a possibility, it's very slim. It's these grants, there's way more applicants than winners. So it's very slim that I'll make the list, but there's a possibility. It's like having that lottery ticket stack you talk about in your wallet. So I'll have that. And I will also have a really great framework that I would never have had.
Yes.
If I
you're
hadn't
prepared
done that.
for the next one.
Huh?
You're prepared for the next one, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm prepared for the next grant application to a degree. I mean, this being a research grant, it's not like a residency grant, but what I can use is as a framework for me writing the damn book.
Yeah.
It's like I figured out what I need to do.
Yeah, and that one of the things that I've noticed is, there's the residency grant and what they're looking for, and then there's if somebody is wanting to give you any money,
Yeah.
right? And so when it comes down to wanting money, applying for a grant that is, going to give you $5,000 to do X,
Yeah.
it's a lot more intensive, and it's a lot more exactly what you've been talking about.
Yeah.
It's like, how does this further the mission or a mission, and
Yeah.
all these kinds of
Yeah.
things. So it prepares you. I mean, even if you can't repurpose what you do,
Yeah.
this you've increased your experience level,
Yeah.
and your knowledge base,
Yeah.
and all these other things, which comes back to context and unfolding,
Hello,
which
hello.
talked about.
Yeah.
uh, Hendrick and all that kind of stuff. And so when I'm listening to this, and I'm thinking, this is really awesome, right? And this is really cool. And it sounds like you're doing all the stuff that you need to do to succeed. And so if I wanted to tease out, like, for, the listener who's not a writer,
Mm.
like, where is that overlap? Where does the Venn diagram
Yeah.
come into intersection? And it's that context building, it's the unfolding,
Hmm.
it's the that gathering of information and reaching out outside of yourself, because I think too often we get too much in this frame headspace where I'm the only one who can do it.
Yeah.
And so we don't reach out for help, we don't reach out for advice and that kind of thing. And so there's a lot that I'm hearing that other people can take away from what you're doing and expand what they're doing. And it
Hmm.
also sounds like you're building a platform, or whatever you want to call it, from which the next time you go to do this, it's going to be less of a heavy lift
Yeah.
because you've done all this other work.
I think so. That all sounds pretty valid to me. And by platform, I'm pretty sure you mean like I've got a bunch of material and sort of a more solid basis conceptually about what the actual grant process is all about and why it exists. And I also think that there's a lot of serendipity involved because the people who I wrote me back, and that is such a powerful thing, So I think that shows that I feel like grant applications are actually a more collaborative process than I had really understood. And I
Mm,
love collaborating. And I feel like people who write you back from this random email from this person they've never met before are people I want to know, So it's gonna be a really solid, interesting path through the forest of grants
mhm.
that I think will, there'll be a little cottage here and there where you can stop in for a cup of tea and stuff, and they can come to your place. And I just think it'll be far more impactful over the
Yeah.
next year than I initially understood it
Yeah.
as.
Well, it's that cliche, luck is the intersection of preparedness and opportunity. And so
Mhm.
you're being prepared, and when opportunities come, you're ready to go.
Yeah, and also just taking advice as it comes. So I don't mean advice from people I'm approaching, but even your example of the of the little brainstorm stuff, having tried it once now, and I'm sure I've done it before, like I know I have, but little, not what you're doing, but little brainstorm type things. But
Mhm.
having done it now in this context, I'm gonna do it a lot more. I think it's really
Yeah.
powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing when you reach out to the world and it responds.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, so as writers, we're constantly sending out stories to get published, or
Mhm.
these, with the grant thing. And so there's this whole curated and, piece of it.
Yeah.
But there's this even more gigantic world of creatives who would love to get a really nice email,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah, and looking to build connection and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's really cool.
I mean, if I'd really had my shit together, I could have said something interesting about their work or, like complimentary or something, but I just didn't have time.
I loved on page 167 of your novel where
Yeah.
you did.
Pander, pander. Anyway, yeah. So that was my experience. So how about your grant update? Do you have
Oh,
any?
mine is tiny. It's embarrassing.
I'm
You know,
rubbing my hands.
You-
Can't wait for you to
Madam,
be
yes,
embarrassed.
Madam Curie here has found her isotopes. But no, it comes back to that when you send something out and you get something back,
Yeah.
there's energy to it and it motivates you. And so I have this application out with Yato, and I got back from them an email, basically saying we'd like to more specifically know when you'd like to be here, what kind of facility you would like to be in,
What?
and the dates and your flexibility and all that kind of stuff.
That is
Which
so
first,
great.
well, hold on.
Oh,
When I first read it, I was like, that's so great. But then
yeah.
they say we send this out to everybody. Don't get too excited.
Oh,
This is
okay.
you're accepted. But I did feel like, you know what? If you don't make a certain cut,
Hmm.
you're probably not going to get this email. Hopefully, maybe. I don't know.
I don't
Maybe
think you would.
having a little moment here. But so it felt really good, and it felt like, okay, it didn't get lost and they're taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Even if they send this to everybody, they also included me,
Yeah.
which is nice. But it also gave me the opportunity to really think about, okay, what do I need from this experience should they say yes? And I realized, I could be really flexible, right?
Yeah.
So they may have people who are like, no, 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 I have the academic year that I have to do this and da 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 da, da, and I can only do
Right.
that. And I can be like much more flexible, which hopefully makes them feel like, oh, this is somebody who we can fit in these spaces that most people don't have time.
Yeah.
And that completely works for me, right?
Yeah. Great.
Especially with what I want to do. So yeah, it was energizing, and it was about the same part of what you experience of putting something out in the world, and you get a little bounce back and a little dopamine hit, and
Yeah.
off you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was happy about it.
Yeah. That's so great. We're both in a good place with the grant experiment. I'm going to write a print update basically for our Gifted Underachievers Substack website. Um, so look out for that.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. And you.
Everybody, fingers crossed. When do you hear? When do you find out?
90 days from the deadline.
Ooh, that's a long 90 days.
I'm okay with that. I'm going to be happy to make a fucking deadline on this thing. Thanks for listening to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. How's your grant experiment going? Are you joining us in this? Do you already do it? Is your life unfolding the way you want it to? Feel free to hop on over to our Substack website, giftedunderachievers.substack.com, and let us know if you're doing a grant app, how it's going, and what you think. We'd love to hear. Until next time.